Coming up, we propose one killer feature that could change how fighting games are balanced and approached. This would be a dark mode where a bunch of things would be hidden, not readily apparent, and this is a mode that has never appeared in a AAA fighting game before. Coming up on EventHubs Talking Block. All right, John. Moving on. If everyone first off can cycle crush the like button because it helps out the channel a ton, we do appreciate it. But I want to talk about one killer Street Fighter 6 feature never before seen in the franchise.
Ooh.
And I've never seen this before actually in any AAA fighting game. Skullgirls had it a little bit where you could check out kind of preview builds of the game and with different characters and stuff, but this is different. This killer feature, what I'm talking about, is an online test mode permanently baked into the game so that Capcom can test changes, new DLC characters, balance changes, other stuff like that, without having players to worry about that impacting their rank or experience. This is so you would have ranked, you would have casual, and then you would have test mode. And the main idea here is that upcoming characters would get some play with live players from the community, and so would balance changes potentially, and we would be able to use that, Capcom would be able to use that to get a better experience out to players out of the gate. So instead of having a character launch maybe too overpowered because, Vanilla Sagat came out there and they didn't realize all the players on the planet would be doing trade into Ultra and other stuff like that, you would immediately be able to get this in the hands of the players and let them do stuff. And to help offset this, I know Capcom's, if they're watching this, they're probably watching it, they usually watch our stuff. They're probably like, oh no, like we can't possibly do that. Well, to mitigate this, having hidden DLC characters and stuff pop up, you could say CFN replays and frame data would not work here. You are playing old school. You get in this mode, you might have a really interesting experience kind of thing, but it's test mode. A lot of stuff could happen. Sean, what's your immediate off-the-cuff reaction to this?
This is something that other games do, right? Like, I don't know off the top of my head a specific example, but I've heard of this, like kind of ongoing betas or like beta for the next, DLC drop or whatever it's going to be, where people can test it out. And so it comes out more refined, more along the line, or more down the line, I should say, of experience and whatnot. So people can, it's better. It's better when it gets there. You kind of get to skip some of this glaring omission, or maybe we shouldn't have this touch of death in the game, or whatever it is. Maybe some of this would be there would be issues in like keeping some of the content under wraps or something like that. But I mean, they would have to change the way that they deliver information, or it's like, or maybe there's just like the character comes out at the end of this month, but really they're out now just in sort of beta test form. I think that's a little bit of change would have to happen from how they do it now, but this sounds like a good idea.
And this is actually an old school callback to potentially fighting like a hidden boss when you go into this mode, right? So say Akuma gets announced as DLC, and when you're playing in test mode, you could potentially play against the developers or other players who have access to Akuma before it's released to the masses. It's basically, say Akuma's coming out in August, it's like, okay, well, for June and July, you might actually run across him and the developers playing him in this mode. And this actually mode would not be based on points or anything like that. You like throw points and everything else out the window. You could get matched up with players of any level. It's all based on connection. This mode is just about playing the game and kind of seeing what you can discover. Did they tweak Ryu's fireball to make it 5 frames faster? Did they do this? It seems like you have a reaction there.
I think that there's an entire part of the population of the well, in this case, Street Fighter community that would just thrive in this mode. Javits comes to mind, because if you go and you think about, like, if you go on Javits Twitter, it's just always exploration. It's like, I've been in the training lab with this, and usually he has some kind of a goal, like, can I stun Gil in one combo with every character or something along those lines, just to sort of explore what the game is, what kind of things can and can't happen. But I imagine people like him would jump into this mode and like they'd just be fish in water, and they'd be finding things. And when you get those types of players and those types of minds engaging with your game like this, that might be magical. Like that might be the kind of thing that, like, wow, the refining tendency of this like kind of new dynamic is really effective, and it really helps point your game in certain directions. I think there's a lot of potential here, and I think there's many of those types of people in the FGC already.
Yes, a lot. And they don't care about their online ranked or how they do and stuff like that. They want to explore these games, and you could still stream this mode like on Twitch or YouTube or whatever and stuff, and upload video after the fact. But CFN CFN would always be dark here. This would just be, you can't find the frame data for this. You can't recall stuff because CFN is so heavily baked into like the live version of the game. It would be really hard for Capcom to take this test mode and kind of make it public, so to speak, in terms of like, frame data and other stuff like that. It might let players uncover too much, right? So if you make this a dark mode where it's basically, you kind of just get what you get here, it might be a little bit janky. That's okay, because this will let the developers hide things that need to be hidden. Even so, going back and watching like a replay there wouldn't be possible on CFN, because the CFN replays don't get saved in this. It's like, nope, you play, it's gone. If you want your CFN replays, saved and other stuff like that, you've got to play casual, you got to play ranked. That's it.
Oh, well, but people would be like, pull up OBS and record their screens and such.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh, is that part of the plan?
Exactly. Yeah, that would give it a very live feel, where you might see something crazy happen, or you might just be playing the game like normal. It's a very random kind of outcome here, and so you might be watching Punk stream, and all of a sudden, a brand new DLC character pops up, and it's being played by one of the game balance team at Capcom and other stuff, and you're like, oh man, what's going to happen? Or you might go an entire day, 2 days, weeks without seeing anything different than what you're normally playing. Very random, very crazy, and to me this actually kind of recaptures a little bit of the old arcade feel, because you would be playing in arcades and you never know who was going to walk up there and kick your ass. Like it's a very different thing, like, because it's a very random matchmaking, and it might be someone who's never played the game before, or it might be someone who's like just happened to be traveling to where you're at and like is one of the best players you've never heard of, and they play they play Fong or something like that. It's like it would kind of introduce a little bit more randomness that us old school players are used to.
Now, I like it so far for sure, but I can't help but shake the feeling that with as many leaks and as much in the way of like, data exploration and people being able to just like hack in and find all this stuff out, this kind of a move, also I should say, it feels like fighting game developers have just kind of recently started to be able to patrol that effectively, where we're actually getting surprising reveals and announcements. But with something like this, it feels like we're giving like another layer of like curtain peeled back to people like that. And I'm afraid that this could lead to just like total like, oh, here's all of our everything. And, the people, because it's still fairly young in its process. Like when a bank first comes out, first invented, it's real easy to rob that bank. And then, it happens a handful of times and you develop your security. It's like, this feels like, at least for Capcom and fighting games, based on how much they've been, well, both hacked and just like data mined and such in recent times, that this would be that next level, and there's a good chance that they're not ready at all for it. So that's nagging me.
No. I mean, it's 100% a thing. We kind of celebrate here behind the scenes when stuff doesn't leak from Capcom, and this is potentially their own leak machine, right? But the thing about it is, they'd have to figure out a system where they don't put anything up here that hasn't already been announced. Like they'll have to come up with something, and again, keeping some areas of CFN dark, keeping some other areas dark, and just making a less featured version of it could potentially shut all those holes down. That's what the main premise of this would be. We don't need all the functionality here. This is literally a test mode just to do all these features.
And we've been talking about it in terms of a new character, right? Like the next DLC character, and all of a sudden they pop up, and that would be part of it. But like I think the majority of this would be more like, okay, what would happen if we made Ryu's standing medium punch 2 frames faster, things along those lines. And I think that's going to be the overwhelming majority of what would be intriguing about this, is like, oh, they did something here and this is possible, or oh, so-and-so's infinite is no longer a thing, or the fast fall, kind of little tweaks like that, or like, and you could also do little test beds. If you've got a character like overpowered Akuma in, season whatever, pick your season of Street Fighter 5, then you could see it's like, all right, what if we took away one aspect of him? How does he fare now? And okay, that's not enough. Instead of having to do that experiment once every year and just do it in a big batch, you could do it slower here. I think this would really feed into a quicker sense of strong balance. And for that, I really like it too.
Yeah, I know the developers are playing matches with Akuma and other stuff like that, but they're also in their own vacuum, right? And it's like you want to get this among the player base where it's going to
Sure.
actually resonate the most, right? Again, Capcom knew about Vanilla Sagat and Street Fighter 4 being like way too powerful and other stuff. They knew about all that stuff. They were doing all that stuff. They just didn't realize that the community was going to be scrubbing people out like crazy, doing that stuff all the time. They're like people aren't going to play with honor and respect and other stuff. They're going to keep going to the cheapest possible stuff and using it and abusing it. And it's like, yeah, that's what's going to happen in a lot of cases. There's funny. It's funny how much like hidden tech though they're the developers knew and other people have known that like they feel that is very vanilla Sagat level that never gets exploited. And they're like, well, why do people not use this? Kind of thing. It's the nature of fighting games. People want the cheapest, easiest stuff they can do. Shouts to Cammy because she's got pretty much all that every time. And so when something gets discovered, everyone's like, well, I'm going to copy that. I'm just going to copy that and use it over and over and over again. And like, that's kind of what happens. So you sometimes have some really great technology and really good stuff that just sits there kind of like waiting to be discovered. The developers know it. No one else does. And it's like, oh, so, but this is a way of sniffing out what the community is going to jump on, and it's so key to balancing the game. And one of the things that developers can do actually is show version numbers on the characters. You were just mentioning like, what if they sped up Ryu's like, medium punch or whatever. Well, you could say, this is Ryu version 1.1 or whatever, and it would be a preview potentially of his balance changes if they stick.
Do they share the particular changes, or do we have to figure out what they are?
You got to figure them out. So, but you can see the version number on the characters changed. That would be a big key. It's not that you don't know what's changed, and you'll have to kind of figure it out and maybe going into OBS or whatever. But that's a random nature of this, and it's like, yeah, you can play it, and the classic Jedi mind trick of like the community thinks something changed for sure. It changed for sure. We'll go look at you can't look at the frame data in this mode. You've got to figure it out yourself. You've got to piece it together. Can you do that? And it's a really interesting prospect there. But man, it's yeah.
I'm not sure. Maybe it would be better to have the patch notes. I'd have to sit and think on it for a while, but it's interesting either way. I'd like to see the experiment run.